The King at Rest. Surrender on stage. Did you know the most magnetic moments of a performer's life often come when they surrender to the music? This rare 1970s photograph captures Elvis Presley on a Las Vegas stage in his gleaming white jumpsuit. Not in a grand pose, but lying flat on the floor. It's a powerful tableau of complete devotion. Exhaustion, raw emotion, and rhythm all collide as he rests one arm casually, face glistening with sweat under the intense spotlights. The crowd roars, yet he looks utterly calm, lost in the groove of a song that consumed him. This image speaks volumes about his artistry. Elvis didn't just sing, he gave himself away, body and soul, every single night. The sweat and the fatigue were proof he held nothing back. Even when his body ached under the weight of fame, his spirit refused to break, displaying that effortless mix of strength and vulnerability that made him utterly magnetic. The moment the world changed, an accidental revolution. Imagine being so shy your greatest movements were completely unplanned. Elvis Presley often recalled the night his life changed forever with touching humility. "The first time that I appeared on stage, it scared me to death," he once admitted. "I really didn't know what all the yelling was about. I didn't realize that my body was moving." These words captured the innocence of a young man who had no idea that his nervous, instinctive movements would soon spark a global revolution. He wasn't trying to shock anyone, he was just being himself, a shy kid with a guitar whose soul was connected to the rhythm of his music. When Elvis first stepped under the lights, he didn't choreograph his charm. The screaming, the tears, the frenzy, it all seemed like a mystery to him. But that was his magic. Everything came from a place of pure instinct, proving his music wasn't a performance, it was a genuine pulse. Before the crown, the working man. What did the king of rock and roll do before he was famous? Before the jumpsuits and the flashing lights, Elvis Presley was a hard-working young man in Memphis, pushing a lawnmower under the hot southern sun. The summer before high school, he started cutting grass for $4 a yard, driven by the desire to help his family earn an honest dollar. In the years that followed, he took on any job he could find, working as an usher at Lowe's State Theater, assembling furniture, and even working as an apprentice electrician at Crown Electric. He carried his guitar to work, humming songs between deliveries, quietly shaping the sound that would eventually change the world. In October 1954, following his first sessions at Sun Studio, Elvis made a pivotal decision. He left his job at Crown Electric, trading the hum of engines for the heartbeat of music. This choice altered history. His success was enormous, but he never forgot the long days and the lessons of humility taught to him by his parents. A reminder that greatness often begins in the humblest places. The unrepeatable phenomenon. Why there will never be another Elvis. Why does the world agree there will never be another Elvis Presley? The answer lies in something deeper than fame or talent. Elvis was not merely a performer, he was a once-in-a-lifetime phenomenon, a force of nature that seemed to come from somewhere beyond the ordinary. His voice could melt hearts or shake walls. His beauty was captivating, yet his spirit remained humble and kind. He carried a rare balance of power and gentleness, a man who could command a stadium yet still take the time to talk softly to a fan. More profoundly, he changed the world around him. When he first stepped onto the stage, he transformed music, culture, and the very meaning of freedom. He bridged divides, uniting people of different backgrounds through the rhythm of rock and roll. His success, rising from a tiny two-room house in Tupelo, proved that greatness could emerge from the simplest beginnings. Even decades after his passing, his presence has never faded, a powerful reminder that true legends are born from heart, not perfection. The pink Cadillac, a symbol of humility and hope. Did you know Elvis refused to use the air conditioning in his legendary pink Cadillac? When Elvis Presley first took the wheel of his pink and black Cadillac in 1955, it became more than a car. It was a gleaming symbol of dreams fulfilled. The elegant vehicle reflected the rise of a young man who had gone from a humble truck driver to a global star. Yet, despite its luxury features, including air conditioning, Elvis refused to use them before a show. He genuinely believed the cool air would affect his voice, and for him, nothing mattered more than the music. He chose to roll the windows down, letting the wind whip through his hair as he drove through Memphis. This seemingly strange choice, a man with every comfort at his fingertips choosing simplicity, perfectly defined Elvis. The pink Cadillac wasn't just a showpiece, it was a moving reminder of his origins, reflecting a spirit that balanced success with sincerity and fame with humility. This iconic car stands as a timeless piece of rock and roll history and a testament to the fact that Elvis never lost touch with the simplicity that made him great. A chance encounter, Elvis and a future queen. What did Elvis Presley have in common with Madonna? In September 1970, the air in Detroit was electric with anticipation for Elvis's arrival. Among the crowd of excited faces was a young girl named Louise Ciccone, who the world would one day know as Madonna. In that moment, she was just another wide-eyed, breathless fan, watching as the king of rock and roll moved through a sea of people with calm grace. His presence was magnetic, his smile warm, and his signature carried a kind of magic that made strangers feel seen. As Elvis signed autographs, there was a quiet humility about him, setting him apart from the image on the posters. He was a superstar who still looked people in the eye, taking the time to make each moment personal. The young girl in the crowd watched every gentle move, unknowingly being shaped by the very energy and commitment that would one day define her own rise to stardom. The burden of dreams, a confession of the heart. What was the greatest driving force behind Elvis Presley's ambition? There were rare times when Elvis let his guard down, speaking from the heart about the hunger that came from growing up poor. "I guess if you were poor, you always think bigger and want more than those who have everything when they are born," he once confessed. So our dreams and ambitions could be much greater because we had so much farther to go than anyone else. This revealed a deep humility and drive. Even after becoming the most famous man in the world, Elvis never forgot the simple dirt roads of Tupelo. "I am not ashamed of my background or the fact that I drove a truck," he stated proudly. "In fact, I am proud that in America we have the opportunity to fight for a way of life." His success was never just about wealth, it was about perseverance and the courage to dream big. Behind the fame, journalist James Kingsley observed a man troubled by the myth, still trying to live with the same honesty and grace that had guided him from the very start. The boy who promised, a son's devotion. Before the king of rock and roll, there was just a little boy with a dream to care for his family. Elvis's mother, Gladys, remembered it vividly. When he was hardly 4, he'd tell me, "Don't worry, baby. When I'm grown up, I'll buy you a big home and 2 cars." Even then, Elvis spoke with a conviction that hinted at his destiny. As he grew, that promise never left him. While other boys were playing, Elvis took afternoon jobs after school, quietly helping his parents make ends meet. He would go to the grocery store and pay the family's bills without even being asked, showing a heart that was already generous. His father, Vernon, loved telling the story of the lawnmower Elvis bought to earn extra money. Elvis pushed it from yard to yard for weeks until, as Vernon joked with a smile, he quit when the girls started watching him. Beneath the humor was a glimpse of the boy who would soon captivate the world, defined by the same mix of humility, charm, and deep family love that stayed with him his whole life. A coat on his shoulders, a quiet moment of love. What does a simple coat tell you about the man who wore it?
This intimate photograph captures a tender moment between Elvis Presley and his companion Linda Thompson as they prepared to board the Lisa Marie, his private jet. The scene seems ordinary, but a story is hidden in the smallest detail. The coat draped over Elvis's shoulders belonged to Linda. She had placed it there herself, a gentle, unspoken act of love to keep him warm before the flight. In that fleeting human gesture, we glimpse a rare moment of sincerity in Elvis's highly public world. Linda wasn't just shielding a superstar from the cold, she was protecting the man behind the legend. It was an understanding between two souls, one giving comfort, the other silently receiving it. Years later, this photograph still holds its quiet power. There is no performance, no spotlight, only tenderness caught in time. In a life filled with grandeur, this image reminds us that Elvis Presley's truest moments were often the simplest ones, born not from fame, but from the kindness and warmth of someone who truly cared. The Boy at Destiny's Edge, a confession of fear. What was Elvis's biggest secret fear at the height of his early fame? Early in his career, only one reporter, Fred Danzig, showed up to interview Elvis, unknowingly capturing one of his most honest moments. They met quietly in the RCA control room, far from the screaming fans. Fred asked him about his famous leg shake, the movement that drove audiences wild. Elvis laughed softly, explaining, "I looked down, saw my legs shaking like crazy, and I figured if they're gonna yell and my legs are gonna shake, I couldn't help it either." In that dimly lit room, there was no myth, just a 21-year-old boy overwhelmed by his dreams. "Things are happening so fast," Elvis admitted, his voice low and uncertain. "Some nights I can't sleep. I get scared, you know? I get real scared." Despite his growing fame, he was still fragile, still human, trying to understand how his simple music had turned his life into a whirlwind. Fred would later remember his eyes, soft, intense, lonely, kind. He looked like a god, but one who hadn't figured that out yet. The unfinished chapter, the love he couldn't keep. Did you know Elvis was planning to marry his final love, Ginger Alden? Vernon Presley once recalled the story of his son's final relationship, a love that seemed destined for forever but ended in heartbreak. Elvis came to his father with a visible spark in his eyes, saying softly, "This is the love I've been searching for. I want more children, a son, and I want Ginger to be their mother." It was one of the few times Elvis spoke with such pure, hopeful certainty. Not long after, he and Ginger visited Vernon to show him her engagement ring. It was a beautiful moment that made everyone believe peace and happiness might finally be within his reach. Yet, behind the joy, something in Elvis's eyes hinted at hesitation. When Vernon tried to talk about the future, Elvis would turn away, distant and thoughtful. Just days before his death, Vernon gently asked about the wedding, and Elvis looked down before answering softly, "Only God knows." The wedding never came, leaving Ginger as the love he found but could never fully keep, one more unfinished chapter in the story of a man who searched for peace until the very end. Mother's wisdom, the foundation of the king's kindness. What was the most important lesson Elvis's mother, Gladys, taught him? Gladys Presley often spoke of her son with a softness only a mother could have. "He was raised well," she once said with quiet pride. "He never lies. He doesn't swear. I never heard him call anyone anything except Mr. or Sir." To her, Elvis was a reflection of the profound love and solid values she and Vernon had instilled in him. From the time he was a boy, Elvis was taught that kindness mattered above all else. Gladys would often tell him, "If you can't help a man out of a ditch, the least you can do is say a prayer for him, and the Lord will never let you fall." Those words stayed with him, shaping the man behind the fame, the one who quietly gave to strangers and treated everyone he met with humility.
Long before the world called him the king, Elvis was simply a good-hearted boy from Tupelo, Mississippi, who carried his mother's gentle lessons into every studio and onto every stage. The greatest joy: finding peace in a daughter's arms. What brought Elvis Presley more joy than any award or stadium full of fans? There were times in Elvis's life when happiness still found its way through the noise of fame, and nothing compared to the day Lisa Marie Presley was born. When he held his daughter for the first time, something in him changed forever. The man who had filled stadiums and moved millions with his voice suddenly found a love that words could not reach. He looked down at her tiny face and saw his entire world reflected in her eyes. In that moment, all the pressure, the fame, and the loneliness faded away, replaced by pure, unconditional love. With Lisa in his arms, Elvis became more than the king. He became a man whose heart finally felt full. Those who saw them together spoke of the profound softness in his eyes and the calm that surrounded him. For all the stages he conquered, this was the moment that truly belonged to him. A father holding his child, finding in her presence a joy deeper than any applause. The undeniable presence. The day Shelley Fabares met Elvis. How did Elvis Presley change a room without even speaking? Actress Shelley Fabares still remembered the first day she met Elvis Presley as if it had happened yesterday. The cast have been rehearsing for weeks, but she had yet to meet the man everyone was waiting for. Then, on that first morning of filming, the doors opened and Elvis walked in. Instantly, the room changed. Conversations stopped mid-sentence, laughter faded, and a hush fell over the entire set. Shelley described it as something almost unreal, a kind of quiet magic that surrounded him. "That man was beautiful," she said softly. "He carried a charisma unlike anything I had ever seen." Yet, what struck her even more was not just his fame, but the kindness behind his eyes. Elvis had a way of making everyone feel like they mattered, greeting each person warmly with that southern gentleness that came so naturally to him. His presence left a lasting mark, a quiet, unforgettable power that came from his heart as much as from his talent. The love and loss of Lisa Marie, a legacy of the heart. What was the greatest blessing and burden of being Elvis Presley's only daughter? Lisa Marie Presley grew up in the shadow of the brightest star the world had ever seen. She was only 4 when her parents' marriage ended, and barely 9 when her life changed forever. In the early hours of August 16, 1977, her father quietly looked into her room and told her to go back to sleep, the last time she ever heard his voice. For Lisa Marie, being his daughter was both a blessing and an immense burden. The world saw her as the heir to a legend, but inside, she was the little girl who had lost her hero. She spent her life searching for peace and connection, pouring her emotion into music with the same raw ache that had once lived in his voice. Though tragedy followed her, she bore her sorrow with quiet strength. When Lisa Marie passed away at 54, it was a profound loss. Yet for those who loved her, it symbolized the reunion of a father and daughter who had been apart for far too long. The Final Bow, a performance of pure devotion. Did you know Elvis's final performances were a battle against his own body? 2 months before his passing, Elvis stepped onto the stage for what would become some of his most powerfully moving performances. His body was failing him, his heart enlarged, his blood pressure dangerously high, but his spirit refused to surrender. He should have been resting, yet there he was, under the stage lights once more, holding the microphone with trembling hands. The audience saw not the flawless performer of his youth, but something deeper, a man stripped bare of strength yet filled with devotion. Each song carried the weight of his struggle and the tenderness of a heart that still beat for his fans. His voice was raw and human, a confession of emotion that could break the hardest heart. In those final performances, he revealed the truest version of himself,
all courage, vulnerability, and grace. He showed the world the beauty of resilience and the strength of a man who, even in his final days, still found the power to sing. The last song, A Farewell in Indianapolis. What happened on the night of Elvis Presley's final concert? On a humid summer night in 1977, the lights dimmed inside Market Square Arena in Indianapolis, and 18,000 fans hushed as Elvis, dressed in white, stepped into the spotlight. Though cheers erupted, behind his smile was a man carrying immense exhaustion and pain. It would be his final performance, though no one could have known. As the show went on, his strength began to fade, his voice occasionally trembling, his movements slower. Yet when the music began, the old magic flickered to life, the charisma and connection only he could create. When he reached the final song, Can't Help Falling in Love, his voice softened into something sacred. It was a farewell whispered from the heart, and the audience, sensing the weight of the moment, fell into reverent silence. When the song ended, Elvis bowed deeply, his eyes scanning the sea of faces one last time. He walked slowly off the stage and disappeared into the shadows. 7 weeks later, the world would lose him forever, leaving that night as a final, unforgettable love letter written in courage and grace. Alone at the piano. The King's loneliest confession. What single word revealed the true pain of Elvis Presley's final years? Late one night, as illness weighed heavily on him, Elvis sat alone at his piano in Graceland. The mansion was quiet, and the only sound was the soft hum of gospel music, the kind that had comforted him since childhood. His fingers moved slowly across the keys, and his voice, once thunderous, trembled with tenderness. The music was not for an audience. It was a prayer whispered into the stillness, a way to find peace. One of his close aides quietly entered the room and watched as Elvis leaned forward, his silhouette bathed in the soft glow of the piano light. The king of rock and roll, surrounded by riches and fame, looked like a man carrying an invisible burden. Wanting to break the silence, the aide gently asked, "How are you feeling, Elvis?" Elvis turned his head slightly, his eyes heavy and distant, and answered in a voice barely above a whisper, "Alone." That single word revealed more than any song could, the voice of a man who had given the world his soul but had little left for himself. The Faltering King, the Baltimore Breakdown. What was the rare moment when Elvis Presley walked off stage during a live show? On a warm night in late May 1977, the Civic Center in Baltimore overflowed with more than 12,000 fans waiting to see Elvis in his radiant Mexican sundial jumpsuit. Though his smile was gentle but weary, the love in the room was as strong as ever. But that night, for the first time in over 2 decades, Elvis faltered. Midway through the show, he quietly turned and left the stage. Gasps rippled through the crowd as confusion gave way to silence. The band played on, but nothing could fill the void left by his absence. An empty microphone stand became a symbol of the deep pain he was fighting. When Elvis returned, he offered a shy apology, joking about twisting his ankle, but his eyes told a different story. Still, he sang. Every word of hurt and unchained melody poured out like a confession, as if giving the last pieces of his soul to the people who had loved him from the start. 2.5 months later, Elvis was gone. The betrayal, the man who lost his will to live. Who did Elvis Presley trust most, and how did that trust break his spirit? David Stanley once revealed a heartbreaking truth. Elvis Presley lost the will to live after discovering he had been betrayed by the one man he trusted most. For decades, Colonel Tom Parker had been at the center of everything: his manager, his advisor, the architect of his global fame. To Elvis, Parker was like family. But the truth began to unfold, exposing a narrative of control, manipulation, and suffocating contracts that drained his fortune. For a man who valued loyalty above all else, the betrayal was devastating. Already weary from relentless touring and failing health, Elvis now carried the crushing weight of disillusionment. Those closest to him saw the change. His once vibrant spirit dimmed, and the joy he found in performing began to fade. The stage, once his sanctuary, had become a prison of expectations. It wasn't the spotlight that destroyed him, but the realization that the world he had built rested on a lie. The lingering emptiness. Elvis's search for a deeper purpose. What did Elvis Presley long for more than fame or wealth in his later years? George Klein once said, "Elvis was tired, not just physically, but deeply, quietly tired." The king of rock and roll had conquered the world and achieved every dream a boy from Tupelo could imagine. Yet the joy that once drove him began to fade, replaced by a quiet ache of exhaustion. It wasn't only his body that was failing him from years of touring and strain, it was his spirit. Behind the dazzling jumpsuits and adoring crowds, Elvis was fighting a private battle against pain, loneliness, and the emptiness that fame often brings. What he truly wanted was to be seen as an artist with depth, a serious actor who could move audiences with more than just his voice. He dreamed of taking on challenging roles that would let him grow, to be respected not just as the king, but as a man of substance. That opportunity never fully came, and when the curtain finally fell, Elvis was left with a longing that success could never fill. The TCB Band, Life on the Road with the King. What was life like traveling with the king of rock and roll in 1972? Life on the road with Elvis Presley felt like being part of something far bigger than music. The schedule was relentless, handled by MGM, and their world was constantly in motion. Every night, 3 planes took to the skies. Elvis on his private 727, Colonel Parker in his own, and the band and crew packed into a smaller Electrajet. When they landed, the magic continued. Limousines and buses met them right on the tarmac, and their luggage magically appeared in their hotel rooms before they did. Elvis lived on an unbelievable scale, yet he carried it all with grace. He earned enormous sums, but every cent was hard-earned and poured back into the production. The planes, the staff, the perfect sound, the flawless lighting. For Elvis, it was about giving people a night they would never forget. He poured himself into every performance, ensuring the audience experienced something almost spiritual, proving that to make something extraordinary, everyone had to feel valued. The soldier's honor. Sergeant Presley's quiet strength. What genuine military rank did Elvis Presley earn during his service? When Elvis was drafted, the world watched in disbelief. The biggest star on the planet could have easily avoided service, but he didn't. Instead, he put aside the glittering suits and became just another young man in uniform, determined to prove he could serve his country like anyone else. He earned the real rank of sergeant, E5, achieved not through fame or privilege, but through hard work, discipline, and quiet determination. For 2 years, there were no bodyguards or special treatment. Elvis woke before dawn, trained in the cold, and shared bunks and rations with men who quickly learned to see past the fame. To them, he was simply Elvis, a fellow soldier who pulled his weight and kept his pride quiet and steady. His time in the Army grounded him, reminding him of his roots and the dignity found in brotherhood. His service became a quiet chapter that spoke not through music, but through honor, proving that greatness is also measured in the courage to serve with humility and heart. From barefoot boy to breadwinner, the power of a young dream. Where did Elvis Presley's enormous drive truly come from? At just 11 years old, Elvis often walked to school barefoot, wearing clothes carefully stitched and altered to fit his growing frame. His family owned almost nothing, only love, faith, and a shared belief that life could someday be kinder. In those years of hardship, music became his sanctuary. He didn't sing because he wanted fame, but because it made the world feel lighter. By 19, Elvis had become the provider for his entire family. He took the pain of his past and turned it into power, transforming the struggle of his youth into songs that touched millions. Yet, even when the world called him a king, he never forgot the boy who once walked barefoot to school. He used his fame to lift others, to care for those who had so little, just as he once had. Elvis Presley's story is a testament to resilience, showing that greatness is born not from privilege, but from perseverance and love, carrying the message that no dream is too far for those who dare to hold on.
The final piece: seeing the man behind the myth. What did people forget about Elvis Presley when he passed away in 1977? When Elvis Presley passed away in August 1977, the world was left in disbelief, with headlines often cruel, drowning the truth beneath sensational stories. People remembered the legend, forgetting the man, the one who had given his soul to his music and to those who loved him. Beyond the whispers was a deeply human reminder that even legends grow weary. Elvis's final years and moments were not of a fallen star, but of a gentle spirit worn down by the weight of his own greatness. His body carried the cost of a life lived for others, endless tours, sleepless nights, and the pressure to remain the king. He took prescription medications not to escape, but to endure, to stand beneath the lights once more and give his audience his heart. That final morning at Graceland was not the end of a legend, but the closing of a deeply human story, one of love, sacrifice, and exhaustion. He found peace, a simple calm after a life of giving everything to the world. A light in the room, the undeniable power of presence. What was the most remarkable thing about Elvis Presley that couldn't be captured on film? The first time Mac Davis saw Elvis Presley, he said it felt as if the world shifted on its axis. He was the most beautiful man you ever saw, Mac would later say, still carrying the wonder of that moment. Elvis didn't just enter a space, he seemed to bring light with him, a magnetic glow that made everyone stop and breathe at the same moment. When their paths crossed again over 10 years later, the magic was still there. When Elvis stepped onto a stage, time seemed to pause. The audience stopped moving, stopped talking, and the world belonged entirely to him. Mac joked about the pure joy on the faces of the women, but behind the laughter was an understanding that what he saw was deeper than charisma. It was an energy, a grace, a kind of light that came from within. That was the true power of Elvis. He made people feel seen, alive, and connected, reminding everyone that some souls shine in a way the world can never quite explain. The angelic quality, a light not of this world. Why did those closest to Elvis Presley describe him as being almost angelic? Linda Thompson, who loved and lived with Elvis, spoke of him not as a celebrity, but as a soul. Elvis had qualities that no other human being has, had, or will have. Some of those qualities are hard to even describe because the charisma, the qualities he had, seemed almost not of this world. Many times they were angelic. To her, Elvis carried something within him that went far beyond fame, an energy that radiated without trying, a warmth that made people feel safe just by being near him. Those who knew him often said his presence filled a room before he even spoke, drawing all eyes to him. It wasn't only his beauty, it was a kind of peace that came from deep within. His laughter could brighten the darkest mood, and even in silence, he carried a spiritual gravity. Linda often said that sometimes, when the light caught him just right, he seemed to glow in a way no spotlight could ever create, proving he was a soul touched by something beyond this world. Alone at the piano, the king's loneliest confession. What single word revealed the true pain of Elvis Presley's final years? Late one night, as illness weighed heavily on him, Elvis sat alone at his piano in Graceland. The mansion was quiet, and the only sound was the soft hum of gospel music.
the kind that had comforted him since childhood. His fingers moved slowly across the keys, and his voice, once thunderous, trembled with tenderness. The music was not for an audience. It was a prayer whispered into the stillness, a way to find peace. One of his close aides quietly entered the room and watched as Elvis leaned forward, his silhouette bathed in the soft glow of the piano light. The king of rock and roll, surrounded by riches and fame, looked like a man carrying an invisible burden. Wanting to break the silence, the aide gently asked, "How are you feeling, Elvis?" Elvis turned his head slightly, his eyes heavy and distant, and answered in a voice barely above a whisper, "Alone." That single word revealed more than any song could, the voice of a man who had given the world his soul but had little left for himself.
The 50 vocal shades, the soul of his voice. How versatile was Elvis Presley's voice, and where did its true power lie? In his 23-year career, Elvis Presley gave the world not just one voice, but many. It has been said he possessed nearly 50 different vocal shades, spanning from the deepest, earth-shaking lows to the most delicate, soaring highs. What made this remarkable was its pure, natural quality. Within a single song, he could move effortlessly from raw power to trembling tenderness, from thunder to silk. This extraordinary ability was a rare, unrepeatable gift, shaped by his relentless drive to be a better artist. He was a student of sound, always searching for new emotion in every lyric. What made his voice so unforgettable was not just its range, but its soul. In one breath, he could sound vulnerable, almost broken, and in the next, rise with the power of gospel and redemption. Every note carried a story, reflecting the man himself, a soul full of contradictions, humanity, and heart. The sincere handshake, a heart that loved freely. What happened when a fan finally got to touch Elvis Presley's hand? A woman once confessed that no words could ever truly describe what it felt like to meet Elvis Presley. Standing near the edge of the stage, she reached out her hand and Elvis took it. In that single, fleeting moment, she felt something pass between them, something beyond music and fame. "The warmth and love I felt from Elvis as he took my hand is something I wish I could share with all of you," she said softly. To her, it felt like being touched by kindness itself. The world saw him as an icon, but in that moment, she saw the man beneath the legend. His eyes carried a gentleness, a light that spoke of genuine connection. Those who knew him well remembered his boundless generosity. He would give away cars and jewelry, not for attention, but because giving made him happy. That brief touch of his hand became a memory the fan carried forever, proving that the greatest thing Elvis ever shared wasn't his fame, but his huge, sincere heart. The brand new day, a father's lesson at dawn. What quiet, wise words did Elvis Presley whisper to his daughter Lisa Marie? Lisa Marie Presley once shared one of her most cherished memories of her father, a quiet, tender morning at Graceland. Elvis had risen before anyone else, and in the peaceful hour, he gently lifted his little girl into his arms and carried her outside. There was no audience, no flashing lights, just a father and his daughter stepping into the soft hush of dawn. He didn't speak much, instead humming a gentle country tune as the sky slowly shifted from deep blue to gold. Then, as the sun began to peek over the horizon, Elvis smiled and whispered, "Look, baby, that's a brand new day. Whatever happened yesterday, today we get to start all over again." His voice was calm and full of warmth. For Lisa, that moment became more than a memory. It was a profound lesson she carried through life's heartbreaks. In that simple gesture, her father showed her that no matter how heavy the past feels, there is always a new beginning waiting in the light of day. The weight of the crown. The final performance. What were the unspoken burdens Elvis Presley carried in his final year of performing? In 1977, when Elvis Presley walked onto the stage for the very last time, the crowd rose to its feet. But those who looked closely could see the change in him. The sparkle in his eyes was softer, his steps slower, his smile more fragile. He was only 42, yet he carried the weight of a lifetime, years of endless tours and the burden of being Elvis, the man the whole world expected him to be. Despite the exhaustion and pain, Elvis never stopped giving. He still walked out under the lights, still lifted the microphone, still sang with everything he had left. Even when his body ached, he sang, not out of duty, but out of profound love for his fans, the family who had believed in him from the beginning. It is heartbreaking to imagine the loneliness he must have felt, caught between the roar of adoration and the quiet ache of his own heart. His last performances were not about decline, they were about devotion. They were a love letter written in song, his way of saying thank you one last time.
The Last Night, a Courageous Goodbye in Indianapolis. Did Elvis Presley have a premonition that his final concert would be his last? Elvis Presley's last performance was strange, almost sacred. On the evening of June 26, 1977, at Market Square Arena in Indianapolis, he walked onto the stage for what would become his last goodbye to the world. The lights blazed, but behind the curtain stood a man fighting through deep pain, holding on to the music that still gave him purpose. A security guard later remembered how Elvis had to be helped to the stage, two men steadying him as he tried to move forward. Just before the show, a doctor gave him an injection, and within minutes, a spark of life returned, enough for him to lift his head and walk into the light one final time. That night, when he sang C.C. Rider and Can't Help Falling in Love, his voice carried a depth it had never known before, fragile yet powerful. The concert became something greater than music. It was a farewell wrapped in love and courage, leaving behind a timeless memory of devotion.
The wheat suit, a dazzling symbol of grace. What made Elvis Presley's wheat suit one of his most iconic and memorable costumes? This photograph captures the magic of Elvis Presley in his famous wheat suit. The light blue jumpsuit, with its delicate patterns of gold wheat stalks shimmering under the stage lights, became a memorable symbol of his legendary 1972 performances, especially those nights at Madison Square Garden. Designed by Bill Ballou, the wheat suit was an extension of Elvis himself. The pale blue reflected his calm confidence, while the golden wheat, representing vitality, made him seem to glow as he moved. Every time he raised his arms or turned toward the crowd, the cape fanned out like wings, creating the illusion that he had become something larger than life. The suit symbolized a man at the height of his artistry, confident yet humble, powerful yet tender. When fans look at photos from those nights, they don't just see a performer. They see a man who poured his dreams, struggles, and love into every movement, turning a moment under the spotlight into something eternal.
A plea to the fans, honoring Elvis's spirit of kindness. What would Elvis Presley think about the state of his fan community today? Sometimes I look around at what the Elvis community has become, and my heart aches. There was a time when being an Elvis fan meant being part of a kind family, built on love and shared admiration for a man who gave the world his heart. But lately, that spirit has begun to fade, replaced by anger and division. I see fans tearing down others who were close to him, or who simply want to honor his legacy in their own way. Elvis was a man who preached love, who believed deeply in kindness and unity, and who saw people not for their differences, but for their hearts. He never wanted his name to be tied to hate or pettiness. His legacy stands for generosity, forgiveness, and connection. If we lose that spirit, we are not honoring him at all. The true legacy of Elvis Presley isn't just in his music, it's in the profound love he inspired. It is up to us, the fans who truly care, to protect that spirit and ensure the world he dreamed of, one filled with understanding, never fades away. The Two-Room House: Lessons of Humility and Love.
How did Elvis Presley's poverty-stricken childhood shape his character? Elvis Presley came into the world in the humblest of beginnings, a tiny two-room house in Tupelo, Mississippi, where love was abundant even when food was not. Gladys and Vernon raised him with deep faith, kindness, and respect for others, lessons that would shape the man behind the fame. Vernon once had to lightly discipline a 5-year-old Elvis for taking empty Coke bottles from a neighbor, and the boy cried not from the pain, but from the realization he had disappointed his parents. Even as a teenager, his gentle nature shone through. When his parents worried about him playing on the high school football team, Elvis looked at his mother and simply said, "I'll quit because I don't want to worry you." His greatest joy was always making the people he loved feel safe and proud. Long before the fame, the gold records, and the lights of Las Vegas, Elvis was simply a good son raised by good people. His greatness began in a small house filled with love, where he learned that humility and family were worth more than anything else. The Turquoise Phoenix, a night of electric connection. What made Elvis Presley's concert on July 24, 1975 so special? On a warm California afternoon, Elvis Presley stepped out with Linda Thompson and his closest friends, Jerry Schilling, Lamar Fike, and Charlie Hodge, the quiet family he relied on. That evening, inside the Swing Auditorium in San Bernardino, the air was electric. At 8:30 p.m., the lights dimmed and Elvis appeared in his radiant turquoise Phoenix jumpsuit, his energy raw and powerful. The crowd of 7,200 rose as one, their cheers echoing through the hall. Under the spotlight, Elvis seemed both larger than life and achingly human. His movements were fluid, his voice rich with feeling, every note carrying the weight of his life's journey. The night was more than a performance. It was a profound moment of connection between a man and the people who had grown up with him and loved him without end. Behind the scenes, his friends and Linda watched, their presence steady and sure. Elvis gave himself completely to the music, leaving behind a timeless memory of a man who truly lived through every song he sang. The urgent warning: Dr. O'Grady's heartbreak. Who noticed the critical state of Elvis's health and tried to intervene? Dr. Elias Ganem O'Grady never forgot the spring of 1977. On stage, Elvis was still the king, but behind the spotlight, his body was failing. He suffered from severe blood clots, an enlarged heart, high blood pressure, and debilitating glaucoma. Every step and every breath was a battle. That May, O'Grady traveled to Lake Tahoe to see Elvis perform. Instead of witnessing greatness, he was overcome with shock. When Elvis walked onto the stage, he was swollen and pale, his eyes heavy, clinging to the microphone with sheer will. He was pushing himself far beyond what his body could endure. Alarmed, O'Grady immediately reached out to Elvis's attorney, delivering an urgent warning. If Elvis did not receive immediate, serious care, there might not be much time left. It was a compassionate plea. The world saw a legend, but O'Grady had seen the truth. A man fighting fiercely just to stand beneath the lights. Elvis had given everything to his fans, and his final struggle was a heartbreaking testament to his unwavering devotion. The billion-record king, and unmatched legacy. How many records has Elvis Presley sold, and why does his music still transcend time and language? With an estimated 1.8 billion records sold, Elvis Presley remains the highest-selling musical artist of all time. No other solo performer or band has surpassed the global reach of his voice. His success was enormous, earning over 150 certified gold, platinum, and multi-platinum awards in the United States alone. What makes this legacy remarkable is that almost 40% of his sales came from outside America, even though he rarely performed abroad and recorded almost exclusively in English. His music swept across continents because it carried an emotion that needed no translation. Elvis placed 149 songs on the Billboard Hot 100, with 18 rising to #1. His achievements in sales, charts, global influence, and live performance remain unmatched. His legacy is not simply a chapter in music history. It is a foundation of modern popular culture, proof that the rare power of a single voice can change the world forever.
A father's final plan, Star Wars, and a simple dream. What simple, loving act did Elvis Presley try to complete on his last full day of life? On August 15, 1977, Elvis Presley spent the final full day of his life doing what came most naturally, loving his daughter Lisa Marie. She was his joy, the quiet place where his heart always returned. That day, Elvis was trying to secure a private print of Star Wars: A New Hope so they could watch it together at Graceland. The film was the sensation of the year, and he knew it would make Lisa happy. He wanted to sit beside her, sharing popcorn and excitement, just a father and his little girl journeying through distant galaxies in the safety of home. It was a gentle, private act with no press or audience. Behind the legend and the bright costumes was a father who treasured ordinary moments more than any spotlight. He had crossed the globe, yet what mattered most was a simple night watching a movie with Lisa. Though he never got the chance, that final gesture speaks more clearly than any stage performance. In his last hours, Elvis was thinking not of fame, but of his daughter's smile. Priscilla's grace and enduring love. How did Priscilla Presley define herself after her marriage to Elvis ended? Priscilla Presley was a quiet 14-year-old girl when she first met Elvis in Germany. And in her innocence, she saw not a legend, but a young man who was tender and vulnerable. Their love story became a storm, forcing her into a world built on cameras and constant noise. Though she loved him fiercely, she eventually realized he belongs to millions, and the quiet ache of sharing her husband with the world was too much to bear. But when the marriage ended in 1973, Priscilla did not disappear. She found her own strength, raising Lisa Marie with steady hands and transforming Graceland into a public place where Elvis's memory would live on. She helped the world remember him as a man, complex, flawed, and deeply human. Priscilla's story is one of a woman who endured heartbreak and unimaginable loss, including the passing of her daughter, yet she continues to walk forward with grace. She is a symbol of a woman who survived the storm, found her own voice, and protected a love too deep to ever fade. The Accidental King, from truck driver to global icon. How did Elvis Presley view his rapid rise to global fame? Elvis often said his life changed almost accidentally. "I just fell into it," he once told a friend, as if destiny had chosen him. He recalled sitting beside his father, Vernon, who would shake his head, laughing softly at the miracle before them. "What happened, El? The last thing I remember, I was working in a can factory, and you were driving a truck." Just a few years earlier, Elvis was a shy young man from Tupelo, delivering electrical supplies and listening to gospel and blues. In 1953, he walked into Sun's studio with a few dollars, hoping to record a song for his mother, Gladys. That small act lit a spark that set the world ablaze. Almost overnight, the streets he once walked in silence echoed his voice. But beneath the glittering lights, Elvis stayed grounded. He never forgot the small kitchen table where his mother hummed old hymns. He remained humbled by what had happened, simply giving thanks. The Graceland Stables, a sanctuary of peace. What role did horses play in Elvis Presley's life at Graceland? Elvis Presley kept several horses at Graceland, and they soon became a living, breathing part of the estate's soul. Their gentle presence brought warmth to the property, transforming them into more than animals. They became family. Aline Alexander, a former local teacher, cared for the horses for 38 years, remaining a quiet guardian of the stables. Her bond with Elvis's world grew even deeper through her friendship with Priscilla Presley, who often visited the stables, finding peace there. It was Priscilla who inspired Elvis to bring horses to Graceland, starting with the sleek black quarter horse named Domino, which he gifted her.
Though Elvis initially knew little about horses, he quickly became passionate, finding joy in simple moments away from fame. Today, Alexander remains close to Graceland, carrying the memories of those days. When visitors see the horses grazing under the Memphis sun, they are witnessing a piece of Elvis's heart, a reminder that behind the legend was a man who loved deeply and found peace in nature. Trading rhinestones for sneakers, Elvis's love for football. What was Elvis Presley's favorite way to escape the pressures of being the king? Beyond the shine of the stage and the roar of the crowd, Elvis Presley found pure joy in a simple game of touch football. In the 1960s and early 1970s, the field at Whitehaven High School near Graceland became his treasured escape. There, under open skies, the king of rock and roll traded rhinestones for sneakers, fame for friendship. Neighborhood kids and close friends would gather, thrilled to play alongside him as just another teammate in the grass. Football gave Elvis something the spotlight never could: the freedom to move, laugh loudly, and compete with the same fiery spirit that electrified his performances. He played with focus and excitement, and what people remembered most was his genuine, unguarded joy. Out there, he was simply a man who loved the rush of a good play and the camaraderie of his team. Whether he stood before thousands or sprinted across a quiet field, he brought the same heartfelt devotion. The radiance of kindness, the true secret of his beauty. Where did the magnetic, almost unreal quality of Elvis Presley's beauty truly come from? No one can deny the captivating presence of Elvis Presley. His beauty wasn't just in the strong jawline or the blue-green eyes. It lived in the way he carried himself, shy and warm, yet radiant enough to stop rooms cold. Long before the world called him the king, neighbors in Tupelo noticed something different about the gentle boy with soft features. As he rose to fame, his beauty became impossible to ignore. When Elvis stepped under the lights, he seemed to draw the air out of the room. Photographers often said he instinctively understood the camera, becoming electric in every frame. But the most striking part of his beauty was always the kindness behind his eyes, the way he smiled at strangers, and the tenderness he showed his parents. His presence made people feel seen, making them feel important. Elvis wasn't simply beautiful to look at, he was beautiful to remember. Graceland, a sanctuary that became a shrine. Why did Elvis Presley purchase Graceland, and why does it remain so vital today? In 1957, at only 22, Elvis bought Graceland, not as a trophy of fame, but as a safe haven for the people he loved most. His mother, Gladys, had always dreamed of a home where her family could live in peace and comfort, and Graceland became that dream, filled with laughter and music. When Elvis passed away in 1977, the private refuge transformed into a place of pilgrimage. Fans traveled from every corner of the world, drawn by love to the gates where the king had lived his most human moments. In 1982, under the guidance of Lisa Marie Presley, Graceland opened its doors, becoming the second most visited home in the United States, surpassed only by the White House. More than 650,000 people arrive each year, eager to sense the heartbeat of the man behind the legend. Graceland remains a living monument to his spirit, a sanctuary where his laughter and kindness still linger in the walls. The mystery of the face, Southern roots and eternal allure. Did Elvis Presley have a hidden lineage that accounted for his striking looks? People often wondered what gave Elvis Presley that unique, striking beauty, imagining roots stretching to distant deserts or the Mediterranean. Yet the truth was far simpler. Elvis was shaped by the red earth of Tupelo, Mississippi, his features born from the heart of the American South. Despite the stories, there was no hidden lineage. His natural hair was light brown, but he chose to dye it dark, which made his blue eyes shine even brighter. He loved the sun, which gave him a natural tan that added to his captivating aura. What people were truly seeing wasn't a mystery of bloodlines. It was a mystery of spirit. Elvis had a way of standing still and still filling a room with his quiet intensity. His magic came not from ancestry, but from the gentleness in his voice and the kindness in his eyes. He was unforgettable not because he resembled someone from somewhere else, but because he resembled no one at all.
The first recording, a gift for his mother. What was the unexpected turning point that launched Elvis Presley's career? Looking at a childhood photo of a thin, shy boy from Tupelo, it is difficult to imagine the extraordinary path that awaited him. He grew up in a tiny two-room house, rarely drawing attention to himself. Yet, in those quiet eyes lived a spark of devotion to music. When he first held a cheap, second-hand guitar, he found a language that belonged to him. He spent hours absorbing gospel, blues, and country, driven by a quiet but powerful certainty that music was where he belonged. After the Presleys moved to Memphis, he walked past Sun Records, imagining singing into a studio microphone. One summer afternoon in 1953, with a few dollars, he gathered his courage and stepped inside. He recorded My Happiness as a simple gift for his mother. The song was tender and unpolished, but it carried all the emotion he had never been brave enough to speak aloud. That shy teenager, still just a son trying to make his mama smile, had begun the journey that would make him unforgettable.
The unmatched king. Elvis's staggering chart dominance. How dominant was Elvis Presley on the music charts during his career? Elvis Presley's success was not a passing phenomenon, but a seismic shift that changed the landscape of popular music forever. Over his lifetime, he sold more than 1 billion records worldwide, a number few artists can ever hope to reach. In the United States alone, he earned over 150 certified gold, platinum, and multi-platinum awards, proving his voice reached far beyond American borders. On the charts, his impact was staggering. Elvis placed 149 songs on the Billboard Hot 100. 114 reached the top 40, and 18 rose all the way to number 1, with his singles holding the top spot for a total of 80 weeks. The concert stage was where he truly came alive. From his record-shattering 1969 residency in Las Vegas to his nearly 1,100 concerts before his final year, he delivered every performance with heart and intensity. Elvis's extraordinary legacy remains unmatched, a testament to the rare power of a single voice. Soul over technique, the hillbilly singer's wisdom. What was Elvis Presley's humble response when an opera singer criticized his technique? In the 1950s, after one of his early concerts, Elvis found himself backstage face-to-face with an opera singer who told him he sang like a hillbilly, that his technique was poor, and that he needed proper lessons. It was not the first time Elvis had heard such criticism. To many trained musicians, he was just a young rebel causing trouble. Elvis only smiled, choosing not to argue or defend himself. He simply said, "I don't know anything about music. In my line, you don't have to." There was humility in that answer, but also a quiet wisdom. He knew that music was more than perfect pitch or classical training. It was about feeling something so deeply that others felt it too. History would later vindicate him. His voice, rich and versatile, carried him effortlessly from rock and roll to gospel to tender ballads. He had no formal training, but he had soul, proving that greatness in music does not come from rules, but from honesty. The awe of fatherhood, a hospital hush. What moment in 1968 caused a profound, emotional silence among thousands of onlookers? On February 1, 1968, at Baptist Memorial Hospital in Memphis, thousands of people, doctors, nurses, and fans, crowded every window, waiting for one moment. When the doors opened, Elvis Presley stepped out, cradling his newborn daughter, Lisa Marie. In that instant, the world-famous performer vanished. There were no bright lights or roaring crowds. Elvis was simply a father, holding his tiny baby girl with a tenderness that softened the noise around him. He kept his eyes on her, his face radiating a quiet joy that settled over the crowd like a warm hush. Hospital employee Bill Elliott, who witnessed the scene, never forgot the feeling, a calm warmth, as if Grace itself had entered the building. The sight of Elvis walking out with his child was so simple, yet it revealed the man behind the legend. Beneath the iconic voice and the whirlwind of fame, there was someone who understood what mattered most. He was not the king of rock and roll then, he was simply a father who loved his daughter. Rising Sun, a rider's tender heart. What was Elvis Presley's personal routine for caring for his favorite horse? Elvis Presley rode with confidence and intensity, but beneath his bold spirit was a man who deeply cared for every horse entrusted to him. His beloved Palomino, Rising Sun, received the greatest share of his affection. After long rides, Elvis was told that Rising Sun needed to be walked to cool down. While most riders would do so for only a few minutes, Elvis would walk him for 3 times that long, speaking softly and patting his neck, ensuring the animal felt safe and calm. His passion for horses truly began in 1966 when he wanted the women closest to him to share that joy, buying a sleek black quarter horse named Domino for Priscilla. This gift sparked a new, peaceful chapter of their life together at Graceland. Though Elvis learned from his friend Jerry Schilling, his heart was fully captured by Rising Sun, a stunning golden Palomino. In those quiet moments, the man who electrified the world showed his gentlest heart. The unseen battle, when the music faded. What was the heartbreaking sign that Elvis Presley's body and spirit were failing him on stage? We all sensed that something was changing in Elvis. The spark that once lifted him so easily seemed dimmer, as if every movement required more strength than before. His energy was heavier, and his eyes carried a quiet tiredness that could not be hidden. Still, he walked out to perform, clinging to the deep devotion he felt for his fans. But soon, the music began to give way to long stretches of talking. He drifted into memories and thoughts that seemed to wander, fragile and not quite his own. At first, many laughed, believing it was part of the show, but those who loved him knew better. It felt like watching someone slip through your fingers, a struggle for presence behind every sentence. Looking back, it is clear that Elvis was battling far more than the public saw. His body hurt, and his heart carried its own wounds. He was desperately trying to survive, not out of carelessness, but as the only way he knew to quiet the overwhelming pain that followed him everywhere. The eternal radiance, a timeless look. Why does Elvis Presley's look remain magnetic decades after this photo is taken? This is a super gorgeous picture of Elvis Presley, capturing a presence that feels magnetic and timeless. Honestly, how are we ever supposed to stop loving this man? His classic look, his effortless charm, and that undeniable cool he seemed to carry without trying at all feel almost unreal. There is a quiet intensity in his expression here that goes far beyond mere appearance. It feels like an emotion, a powerful, unforgettable connection that speaks directly to the soul. Some legends simply do not fade. They become enshrined in memory. Their image a perpetual reminder of a moment when the world was changed by a single voice and a single look. Elvis is one of them. He wasn't just a star of his era, he was and remains a phenomenon. This photo endures because it captures not just a face, but the very essence of a man who possessed a quiet, radiant power that time has proven impossible to forget. The simple thank you, a glimpse of humility. What was the simple phrase Elvis Presley often used that proved his genuine humility? Elvis stepped up to the microphone, his voice warm and steady, and said to the crowd, "Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Good evening, and I hope you enjoy our show tonight. We're going to try to do all the songs you want to hear." The words were simple, but they carried the unmistakable tenderness of a man who never took a single audience for granted. In that brief moment, you could feel the intimate bond he shared with the people before him. Elvis was not speaking from a script or out of habit. He was speaking from the heart. To him, it was never just a concert. It was a celebration of music that connected strangers like family. His gratitude felt genuine, almost personal, as though he was welcoming every person in the room into his world. The king of rock and roll could have simply launched into a song, yet he chose to start with respect, a quiet, profound thank you that showed his audience how much their love truly meant to him. The weary young man, a rare photo of rest. Where did a journalist capture this profoundly honest photograph of Elvis Presley sleeping? In this rare photograph, taken in the final week of July 1956, we see a side of Elvis Presley that few ever witnessed. The picture was captured by journalist Lloyd Shearer for Parade magazine, inside a modest room on the 6th floor of the Peabody Hotel in Memphis, Tennessee. Here, there were no screaming crowds, no bright stage lights, and no glittering costumes. Just a young man, only 21 years old, finally still. Elvis is shown resting deeply, his head turned slightly, his face softened by sleep. In that quiet moment, he was not the king of rock and roll, but simply a weary young man trying to gather strength between one whirlwind chapter of his life and the next. His rapid rise had already begun to consume his days with endless concerts, recording sessions, and travel. His breathing was slow, his body surrendered to rest, a simple, poignant reminder that even legends are beautifully, achingly human. A mysterious pull, the quiet magic of his presence. What was it about Elvis Presley that made people unable to look away? One of the most touching stories about Elvis did not unfold beneath bright spotlights, but in a quiet, deeply personal moment. One fan recalled the first time they met him. "The last person to walk through the door caught my eye and stole my breath. There was something utterly different about him. He was described as quiet, yet not withdrawn, confident, yet shy, open and friendly, yet touched with a sweetness that made him almost bashful. I could not look away," she confessed. There was a kind of magic around him, a quiet pull that felt impossible to explain. It wasn't anything he said or did. It was simply who he was. His hair was light then, his frame slim, his eyes a clear shade of navy blue, and his smile could soften even the hardest heart. That quiet pull remains a mystery, proof that Elvis carried an energy that transcended fame, drawing people toward his light with an impossible-to-resist, almost spiritual grace. The weight of weariness, a heartbreaking truth. How did Elvis Presley's expression in 1976 reveal the hidden struggles he faced? This photograph of Elvis Presley, captured in the early months of 1976, tells a quiet and heartbreaking truth. The man who once lit up every stage now wears visible weariness across his face. His eyes, once bright with mischievous fire, seem clouded with exhaustion, as though they are carrying worries too heavy to name. It is a striking contrast to the larger-than-life figure the world adored, a poignant reminder that behind the legend stood a deeply human being. For decades, the world asked Elvis to be more than a man. He was expected to be a symbol, a myth brought to life. Every performance demanded that he live up to the impossible idea of Elvis. Yet inside, he struggled with personal battles and unspoken pain that followed him everywhere. In this photo, he tries to hold himself with the strength everyone knew, but the truth slips through in the tired set of his mouth and the profound heaviness in his gaze. The dual presence, the icon and the soulful man. What did Elvis Presley's appearance in the 1970s reveal about his artistry? This rare photograph of Elvis Presley, taken in the 1970s, captures him at a unique height of his artistry. By then, he was no longer just the boy who shocked the world. He had become a man whose voice carried both triumph and heartbreak. The quiet intensity of his eyes and the graceful strength in his posture reveal a presence that seemed larger than life, yet profoundly human. In these years, his voice reached its deepest beauty. Every lyric felt lived in, poured from the center of his soul, blending tenderness, fire, and ache into a sound that could move thousands to tears. Offstage, his presence was just as captivating. He carried an effortless charm that put people at ease, but with a hint of mystery, a quiet depth behind the charisma. This photograph holds that duality, the dazzling icon and the gentle, soulful man. It reminds us that even at the height of fame, Elvis remained grounded in the experiences that shaped him, a man whose heart was beautifully, achingly human.
The pink Cadillac, the last gift of a devoted son. Why was the pink Cadillac sacred to Elvis Presley after his mother's passing? After returning home from his military service, Elvis stood at the peak of fame, but his heart belonged, first and always, to his mother Gladys. Years earlier, Elvis bought a blue Cadillac, but when it burned on the roadside, his first thought was to replace it for Gladys. He bought a new Fleetwood, then asked his friend Art to repaint it in a radiant shade of pink, a color that seemed to hold pure joy. The greatest pleasure wasn't showing it off. It was the afternoons he would take his mother for slow, quiet rides around Memphis. For Gladys, raised in poverty, it felt like a dream. For Elvis, it was proof he could finally give back to the woman who had sacrificed everything for him. "She was the #1 girl in my life," he later said. In 1958, when Gladys passed away unexpectedly, Elvis was devastated. The pink Cadillac, once a symbol of success, became sacred, the last gift he could keep for her, a reminder of their quiet laughter and a mother's eternal love. Sculpted by time, the classical beauty of Elvis. What ancient idea of beauty did Elvis Presley seem to embody? Some photographs of Elvis Presley have a mysterious stillness that makes you pause, as though seeing him for the first time. People often say Elvis possessed the kind of features the ancient Greeks and Romans believed represented perfect beauty. There is something unmistakably classical about him: the straight, elegant nose, the proud jawline, the depth in his eyes. He seems sculpted, not born. Studying photos of ancient statues, carved centuries ago to capture the ideal form, you find strange echoes of Elvis. The same symmetry, the same grace, the same quiet intensity. What makes this so remarkable is that it simply fits. Elvis carried a beauty that felt timeless, as if it belonged not just to the 20th century, but to every age before it. He had a look that felt mythic, a bridge between worlds. His face was not only handsome, it was a soulful canvas, reminding us that some people are born not just to be seen, but to be eternally remembered. Sculpted by time, the classical beauty of Elvis, version 2. Why did people often compare Elvis Presley's face to a classical statue? Some photographs of Elvis Presley have a captivating stillness, making you pause every time, as though seeing him for the first time. You can look at them 100 times and still be struck by his beauty. Many believe Elvis possessed the kind of features the ancient Greeks and Romans called perfect. There is an unmistakable classical quality to him: the straight, elegant nose, the proud jawline, the generous mouth, and the profound depth in his eyes. He looks, quite simply, sculpted. When comparing his face to photographs of ancient statues of kings and gods, a strange echo appears: the same symmetry, the same quiet intensity. This isn't a comparison that needs justification, it simply fits. Elvis carried a beauty that felt timeless, as if it belonged to every age. His look was mythic, both familiar and otherworldly, like someone who stepped out of a legend and into real life. His face was a bridge between the ancient and the modern, proving that some people are born not just to be seen, but to be remembered as eternal ideals. The Barefoot Boy, a heart that never forgot home. What quiet vow did Elvis Presley make to himself after growing up in poverty? He was just 11 when he walked to school barefoot, his clothes carefully stitched by his loving mother. Elvis Presley grew up knowing what it meant to have nothing. No fancy meals, no money, only faith and family holding the pieces together. But inside that quiet boy was a small, stubborn flame. He carried the belief that life could be bigger than the two-room house that sheltered him. By 19, he was lifting his family out of hardship. Every song he sang carried the weight of sleepless nights and whispered prayers from his parents. Even when the spotlight found him, when fame became unimaginable, Elvis never forgot where he came from. He carried Tupelo with him in the way he spoke and the way he treated people, never stopping his generosity. His story is one of resilience, about rising without forgetting the ground you once stood on. He is remembered not just as the king, but as the barefoot child who believed his voice could carry him and his family to a brighter life. The unforgettable aura, Mac Davis's awe of Elvis. What made Elvis Presley's presence unforgettable for those who worked with him? "He was the most beautiful man you ever saw," Mac Davis once said, his voice still carrying a kind of awe. When Elvis entered a room, it felt like the universe had shifted, as if light and warmth had suddenly found their way in. Mac first met Elvis at 19 and was struck not only by his looks, but by the gentleness beneath the fame. Over a decade later, when their paths crossed again, the magic was still there. Elvis still possessed that rare presence that wrapped itself around everyone nearby. On stage, the world belonged to him. Mac described the audience's reaction with a playful grin, saying their expressions of pure joy couldn't be wiped away. But those smiles came from something deeper. Elvis carried a spark that touched people beyond the surface, an energy that made every song feel personal. He didn't just perform, he transformed the space, reminding everyone that he was the boy from Tupelo who had once dreamed with nothing but a guitar. The Great Prank, Laughter in the Morning. What hilariously unexpected prank did Elvis's friends pull on him in Las Vegas? In the summer of 1972 in Las Vegas, new assistant Billy was tasked with waking Elvis. He stepped into the room, called softly, and gently shook Elvis's shoulder, but Elvis didn't respond. Confused, Billy returned to the living room, only for Rick and David to tease him. The two veteran friends then followed him in, acting like they would show the rookie how it's done, but Elvis still wouldn't move. Rick then noticed a bucket of water next to the bed, and, with a mischievous smile, he and the others dumped the entire thing onto Elvis. In a split second, Elvis shot up like a tiger, tackling all three of them to the floor, half angry, half laughing, shouting, "You threw water on me, huh? Let's see about that." The four of them wrestled wildly, laughing uncontrollably until they lay exhausted on the floor. They later found out Elvis hadn't been asleep at all. He was just testing them. This legendary prank became an unforgettable memory of brotherhood, proving that behind the spotlight, Elvis was playful, down-to-earth, and full of love. The Heavy Heart, a life of sacrifice and sweetness. What was the quiet truth about Elvis Presley's life that was misunderstood after his death? On a quiet Tuesday morning, August 16, 1977, the world lost the man who had given it so much. Elvis Presley was rushed to Baptist Memorial Hospital and pronounced gone at just 42. For 20 years, his voice and smile had been a steady source of joy, but beneath the glittering lights was a man carrying a weight few could see. His body carried the cost of a life lived for others, endless tours and sleepless nights. He loved the familiar flavors of the South, fried potatoes, sausage, and banana sandwiches, a quiet attempt to soothe the ache inside him. He was a gentle soul who never passed by someone in need, often giving away cars, houses, and money without hesitation, simply to see someone smile. On stage, he was pure electricity. Offstage, he was fragile and tender, searching for peace.
His greatest gift was not the spotlight, but his heart. His voice still rises like a prayer, comforting anyone who listens, a timeless reminder that the boy from Tupelo still sings. The language of love, Elvis's heartfelt hugs. How did Elvis Presley communicate his deepest feelings to his friends without saying a word? Billy never forgot the very first time he met Elvis. Elvis didn't shake hands. He simply pulled Billy, Rick, and David into a warm group hug. That embrace carried a quiet tenderness, a gentle strength that spoke volumes before any words were exchanged. Whenever Elvis returned home from filming movies, he would greet everyone politely, but he always sought out the boys to wrap them in a long, heartfelt hug, embracing them like family. Over 17 years, those hugs became their language. They shared countless embraces, some tight enough to cause laughter, others lingering for minutes when words felt too small, even ending up in tears when the world felt too heavy. Their friendship was built on the simplicity of arms wrapped around a friend, reminding them that they mattered. Just 2 days before Elvis passed away in 1977, he and Billy shared one last hug. Elvis once told Billy never to be afraid to show how deeply he cared for someone, saying a hug was enough to tell the whole story. The Good Husband, Priscilla's honest memory of love. What was Priscilla Presley's most honest reflection on the end of her marriage to Elvis? When Priscilla Presley speaks of her life with Elvis, she remembers not just the legend, but the man she knew behind closed doors. She once shared a heartbreaking, honest truth. He was still a good husband, but there were too many of us. In that simple line lies the heart of their journey, a love that was real, yet constantly interrupted by the world outside. Their story began quietly in Germany, built on trust and humor, but when she moved to Graceland, everything changed. The man she loved belonged to millions, and the constant feeling of sharing her husband with the world never faded. Still, she never spoke of anger, saying, "He wasn't cruel, he just didn't know how to stop being Elvis Presley." They divorced in 1973 but remained close, walking out of the courthouse hand in hand. Priscilla later said, "I loved him then, and I love him still." Their story is one of two people learning that some loves are too deep to fade, even when they are too big to live within the walls of a marriage. Santa Claus's secret, Elvis's quiet generosity. What secret, selfless act of kindness did Elvis Presley perform during Christmas? On the third day of Christmas, a quiet evening at Graceland turned into something unforgettable when one of Elvis's staff mentioned a heartbreaking story. A local woman had just lost everything she owned in a house fire. Her children faced Christmas with empty hands and heavy hearts. The moment Elvis heard this, he couldn't sit still. He immediately called a store and had it opened after hours, then began buying everything the family would need: clothes, furniture, warm coats, and toys. He didn't ask their names or want thanks. He only cared that they would feel hope again. By the next morning, an apartment had been rented and fully furnished just for them. Before the man left to bring the family to their new home, Elvis gave one gentle instruction. If she asks who did this, tell her it was Santa Claus. This is the Elvis his loved ones remember. Not the superstar, but the man with a heart so big it couldn't ignore another person's pain, who believed Christmas was about giving without being seen. The Gentle Whisper, a lesson in new beginnings. What profound wisdom did Elvis pass on to Lisa Marie during a sunrise? Lisa Marie Presley once said that one of her dearest memories of her father was a quiet morning at Graceland, a moment so gentle it stayed with her forever. Just before dawn, the house was silent. Elvis woke before anyone else, scooped his little girl into his arms, and carried her outside into the cool pre-sunrise air. He hummed an old country tune as they watched the sky slowly begin to glow. When the first rays of sunlight touched the trees, Elvis looked down at his daughter and whispered, "Look, baby, that's a brand new day. Whatever happened yesterday, today we get to start all over again." Lisa would later say that those words became her compass through every heartbreak. In that simple morning gesture, her father wasn't the king of rock and roll. He was simply a loving dad, teaching his daughter about hope, forgiveness, and the quiet strength of beginning again. That sunrise still lingers, a tender reminder that even the brightest stars knew how to find beauty in the stillness of a brand new day. Cornbread and compassion, Vernon's guiding words. What moral foundation, established by his father, did Elvis Presley live by? One of the most beautiful truths about Elvis Presley came from the simple wisdom of his father, Vernon Presley. "Poor we were, I'll never deny that," Vernon once said, "but trash we weren't. There were times we had nothing to eat but cornbread and water, but we always had compassion for people. We never put anybody down. Neither did Elvis." These words reveal the foundation of Elvis's character, a heart shaped by hardship but guided by grace. In their tiny two-room house in Tupelo, Vernon and Gladys taught their son that dignity was not measured in money, but in how one treated others. Elvis never forgot where he came from. He greeted stagehands by name, thanked waiters, and spoke softly to fans. The lessons of cornbread and water stayed with him, echoing through every act of generosity and every kind word. His greatness was not only in his music, but in the compassion that flowed from his soul. The unseen illness, the private battle of the king. What heartbreaking truth about his health caused Elvis Presley to rely on medication? When people ask whether Elvis was on drugs all the time, they often miss a truth that is far more human and heartbreaking. Elvis was not chasing escape. He was fighting to survive inside a body that was slowly betraying him. Like his mother, Gladys, he carried a hereditary heart condition. On top of this came blinding migraines, severe glaucoma, and unbearable digestive issues. His weight changes were the visible toll of illness, of a body struggling to meet the impossible expectations of being Elvis Presley. By the 1970s, doctors had filled his world with prescriptions, stimulants to wake him up, sedatives to help him sleep, and painkillers to dull the constant ache. These were given to him by people he trusted, who assured him each pill would make it easier to perform. The cruel irony was that what was meant to help him only deepened his suffering. He wasn't reckless, he was desperate to ease the pain and stay the man his audience loved, a tender-hearted soul doing his best to hold on. The nurse's testimony, a gift of sincerity. Who was Marion Koch, and what personal gift did Elvis give her? Elvis Presley never forgot the people who treated him with kindness. Marion J. Koch, the private nurse who cared for him from 1975 until his passing in 1977, saw the man behind the myth more clearly than most. In her memoir, she wrote that Elvis's gratitude was deep and sincere. "He was never just my patient," she recalled. "He was a man with a tender soul who said thank you not out of habit but out of heart." Even as his body weakened, he never stopped recognizing the people who cared for him, always calling her Miss Koch with respect. One evening, as she was leaving Graceland, Elvis stopped her and said softly, "The doors of this house will always be open for you." As a sign of his appreciation, he gifted Marion a car and a gold cross adorned with diamonds. It was a private gesture of thanks for the compassion that steadied him when life felt unsteady, proving that what he cherished most was not applause, but simple human warmth. The final performance, a love letter to the fans. What emotion did Elvis Presley's final concert in Indianapolis truly convey? By the summer of 1977, when Elvis Presley walked onto the stage, the world still rose to its feet, but those who truly loved him could feel the change. His steps were slower, his body weary, carrying the invisible weight of years of struggle. Yet when the first note filled the air, the old magic returned. His voice, still rich and full of soul, rose like a prayer. On June 26, 1977, in Indianapolis, Elvis gave his final concert, a performance that felt like a profound farewell. His voice trembled at times, fragile yet fierce, carrying every emotion his heart could hold. Before one song, he let out a quiet sigh, and the whole arena seemed to stop breathing. He was no longer just performing, he was sharing his heart. Even in pain, he sang through the exhaustion because giving was all he knew. That night, Unchained Melody was his heart laid bare, a final gift from a man who had given everything he had to give. The love that built a jet. What was the true, heartfelt meaning behind the name of Elvis Presley's private jet? In this photograph, Elvis Presley is captured stepping onto the Lisa Marie. Not just a jet, but a dream given wings. It was November 27, 1975, and he was bound for Las Vegas. Yet in that quiet moment before takeoff, it wasn't the roar of the crowd that filled his mind. It was pride and the love of a father. Earlier that year, Elvis had bought the retired Delta Airlines Convair 880 for $250,000. He designed every luxurious inch with care, gold-plated seatbelt buckles and suede panels. But when the time came to name it, there was never a question. He called it the Lisa Marie, after the one person who held his whole world in her small hands. That plane was a symbol of love, carrying the name of the little girl who could make the king melt with a single smile. It was proof that a poor boy from Tupelo could now share the skies with his daughter.
Charlie Hodge, the faithful friend and royal jester. Why was Charlie Hodge called Elvis's court jester, and what was his true role? Elvis Presley once said, "Every king needs a court jester, and Charlie is mine." But Charlie Hodge was so much more. They first met in 1956 and then reconnected in the Army in 1958 during Elvis's darkest chapter after losing his mother. On the voyage to Germany, Charlie stayed by Elvis's side, lifting his spirit with jokes and songs. He kept Elvis sane, a friend later said. Most fans remember Charlie as the man who handed Elvis his scarves and adjusted his cape on stage, but few knew how much Elvis truly needed him. Before every show, when Elvis was nervous, it was Charlie who steadied him and whispered encouragements. When others drifted away, Charlie stayed at Graceland, loyal and quiet. He never sold stories. When he saw Elvis slipping deeper into pain, Charlie was one of the few who dared to confront him, once driving him to the hospital without explanation, an act of pure love. Charlie truly saw the human being behind the legend. The day his heart broke, Lisa Marie's departure. What happened when Priscilla moved Lisa Marie out of Graceland that shattered Elvis? That day marked one of the deepest heartbreaks of Elvis Presley's life, October 9, 1973, the day Priscilla took Lisa Marie away from Graceland. For Elvis, it was the day his world fell apart. Jerry Schilling recalled watching as Priscilla packed the little girl's clothes while Elvis stood silently, his face pale, eyes empty. His composure broke when he had to ask his friends to carry the luggage because he simply couldn't bear to do it himself. 4-year-old Lisa, unaware of the storm unfolding, was laughing in the garden. When it was time to say goodbye, Elvis held his button head close and whispered, "Be good, baby. Come visit Daddy often." Lisa, perceptive, asked, "Are you crying, Daddy?" Elvis couldn't answer. He turned and walked back into Graceland without looking back. That night, Jerry and Joe listened helplessly as they heard the sound of a man breaking. That day was the beginning of the end for the Elvis they knew. The unforgettable truth: Elvis's self-doubt. What did Elvis Presley confess to his close friend Kathy Westmoreland about his legacy? Few people ever truly knew the man behind the myth, not the superstar, but the private soul who wrestled with loneliness and longed to be understood. Kathy Westmoreland, a close friend and backup singer, once shared a heartbreaking, unforgettable truth. Elvis never truly believed people would remember him. Imagine that! A man who redefined music, who moved hearts across the globe, yet doubted his own place in history?
Beneath the glittering fame was someone fragile, deeply human. Those who knew him said his generosity was boundless, his compassion sincere. He would stop in the middle of a busy day just to listen to someone's story or offer help without being asked. His strength was in how he kept showing up, no matter the pain, still giving, still caring. His legacy endures not only in his music, but in the hearts of those who remember the man behind the crown, a soul that yearned for connection and left a mark of kindness on the world. The final moment, a book in hand. What small, poignant detail was discovered in the final moments of Elvis Presley's life? When Elvis Presley was found that morning, the scene was both devastating and deeply human. The king of rock and roll lay face down on the bathroom floor of Graceland, a book still clutched in his hand. That small detail said everything. Even in those final moments, he had been seeking a little peace, a quiet escape from the noise of fame and the physical pain that had followed him for years. Elvis had battled his body for a long time. The health issues he faced were not from carelessness, but from genetics and relentless strain. He suffered from a twisted colon and severe illness, and sitting alone in that bathroom, book in hand, was one of the few ways he could find comfort. The image reminds us that even legends seek refuge in simple, ordinary peace, a few moments of stillness where the world cannot reach them. He didn't leave this world as the king, but as a man who had given everything, his voice, his heart, and his soul, until there was truly nothing left to give. The unspoken pain, fighting to stay the king. What was the medical truth behind the physical changes Elvis Presley experienced in his later years? There's a truth about Elvis Presley that too many forget. Behind the glitter and the myth stood a man fighting a body that was failing him. He was born with a twisted colon, a painful, lifelong condition that caused severe digestive issues. In the 1970s, the medications he took, prescribed by doctors to help him sleep, wake up, and function through his relentless touring schedule, were not a sign of recklessness, but of desperation. They were survival. The pills dulled his pain but took a heavy toll, causing the physical changes and swelling that the tabloids fixated on. Yet he kept going. Even when his hands trembled, he walked out in front of thousands and gave them everything he had left. What made Elvis extraordinary was his perseverance. He gave freely, quietly paying hospital bills for strangers. His story is one of endurance, of a man who fought harder than anyone realized and left behind a legacy of humanity. The Wedding Dress Girl, a raw moment of emotion. What was the meaning behind the famous 1956 photograph of Elvis and the girl in the wedding dress? It was July 1, 1956, in New York City. Outside the Warwick Hotel, Elvis Presley, just 21, stepped out. A young girl in a simple white wedding gown, clutching a small piece of paper, rushed forward. "Mr. Presley, please, could I have your autograph?" she asked breathlessly. Elvis smiled, signed the paper with easy grace, and quickly slipped back into his car. Photographer Alfred Wertheimer captured the entire exchange. The girl turned to leave, holding the paper like a sacred treasure, but the reality of what had just happened was too much. Tears began to fall, silent at first, then uncontrollable. Wertheimer's camera followed her, capturing the raw, unguarded truth of that moment, the joy, the disbelief, and the heartbreak that comes with meeting someone larger than life. In that photograph, Elvis wasn't just a star. He was a symbol of what it meant to feel so deeply. He touched something in his fans that was pure, human, and unforgettable. The Fragile Soul, Marion Cox's quiet witness. What was the profound truth about Elvis Presley that his nurse, Marion Cox, often observed? He was the fragile boy within this great man. Those were the words of Marion Cox, the private nurse who cared for Elvis Presley in the final years of his life, from 1975 until 1977. To the world, he was the king of rock and roll. To her, he was simply a man who needed kindness, compassion, and rest. Marion first met Elvis at Baptist Memorial Hospital and immediately felt his presence, warm, magnetic, and deeply gentle. Elvis trusted her completely, and she soon became part of his inner circle, tending to him at Graceland through nights of pain and exhaustion. With Marion, he didn't have to pretend to be strong. He could speak openly about his fears and the heavy burden of living as a legend when all he wanted was peace. She saw what the cameras never could, a man with a child's heart, aching for comfort in a world that rarely allowed him rest.
The Private Vows, a secret Las Vegas wedding. What gentle request did Elvis make during his private wedding ceremony to Priscilla? Elvis and Priscilla Presley's wedding in 1967 was a quiet act of love wrapped in secrecy and tenderness. After years of relentless public attention, they chose to marry on their own terms. In the early morning of May 1, 1967, they boarded Frank Sinatra's private jet in Burbank, hidden from the world's eyes. With only a few trusted friends and family, they landed in Las Vegas and were married hours later in a small suite at the Aladdin Hotel. The ceremony lasted just 8 minutes. Priscilla glowed in her simple white gown, and Elvis, in his black paisley tuxedo, looked at her as if the rest of the world had disappeared. When the officiant began to read the vows, Elvis made one small personal request. He asked that the word obey be left out. It was a gentle gesture, a sign of the respect he held for her, and a glimpse into the tenderness that often lay hidden beneath his fame. The last night, an ordinary need for peace. What was the last ordinary act Elvis Presley performed before his death? I think of Elvis Presley's final day, August 15, 1977, and even after all these years, the memory feels profoundly human. The world remembers it as the day the music stopped, but it was simply another long, restless night. That evening, Elvis left Graceland for a late-night dentist appointment, returning just before midnight. The last photographs ever taken of him show that moment, his Stutz Blackhawk pulling through the gates, his expression calm, tired, but still proud. It was such an ordinary thing, yet so achingly human. The king of rock and roll heading to the dentist at midnight because the world would never let him live by anyone's clock but his own. He was looking for relief from pain, or maybe just a few quiet hours of peace. His body was fragile after years of medical strain, but his will to keep going never wavered. Even in his last hours, he was fighting to stay strong, still determined to make the next show. What did people find most captivating about Elvis Presley's iconic appearance? Beauty is often said to be subjective, yet when it comes to Elvis Presley, it feels almost universal. No other man seemed to possess the quiet, magnetic radiance he carried so effortlessly. His beauty was never only about perfect features, it lived in his presence, in the way he seemed to glow from within. He did not ask to be noticed, he simply was. I didn't fully understand his allure until I began watching his old performances and interviews. There was life in him, warmth in his laughter, and something deeply human in the way he looked at the world. His beauty came alive when he moved, when he spoke, when he smiled as if he carried sunlight inside him. My own mother, born long after his time, said the same thing. It was not only his face that caught her, but something about his spirit. His beauty was a bridge between the ordinary and the divine, proving that some people are born not just to be seen, but to be remembered eternally. The final struggle, courage in Baltimore. What did Elvis Presley's performance in Baltimore on June 26, 1977 truly represent? June 26, 1977, the final concert Elvis Presley would ever give. In the photographs from that night, the pain is almost tangible. His face, once radiant with youthful energy, now bore the marks of exhaustion. His body seemed weighed down by the years of strain and the immense burden of expectations. Yet even then, as his strength faded, Elvis stood beneath the lights and gave everything he had left. You can see it in his eyes, that unspoken determination, that profound love for his music and his audience. Every note he sang came from the deepest part of him, not out of obligation, but because music was the thread that had carried him from the poverty of Tupelo to the heart of the world. Those who were there that night saw more than sadness. They saw courage. Despite his failing health, Elvis sang with a kind of aching beauty that comes only when a soul is nearing its final curtain.
The proud father, confronting a critic for Lisa. How did Elvis Presley teach his daughter, Lisa Marie, a lesson about love and protection? Lisa Marie Presley always called herself a daddy's girl, the joy that softened every edge of his fame. Though the world saw him as the king of rock and roll, Lisa saw only daddy, warm, funny, and fiercely protective. Lisa once shared a treasured memory when, as a 9-year-old, a neighborhood woman spoke cruelly about her father, saying he thought he was the king of everything. It cut Lisa deeply. When she returned home, her eyes still red, she told her father what had happened. Elvis listened quietly, then asked gently, "Where does she live, honey?" Moments later, they were in his car, driving down the street. Elvis, dressed impeccably, got out, walked up to the woman's door, and introduced himself with all his charm. He spoke to her about his daughter's hurt, and the woman, stunned, was left speechless. It was a beautiful act of love, showing Lisa that her father was a man who would always stand up for her. The quiet confession, longing for a normal life. What heartbreaking confession did Elvis Presley make to a relative just days before his death? This is one of the most heartbreaking stories ever shared about Elvis Presley. A quiet, deeply human moment in early August 1977, just days before his passing. During a visit at Graceland, Elvis took a close relative, his cousin, aside. His voice was low and rough, exhaustion clear in every word. "'Cuz," he said softly, "you don't know how lucky you are to be living the kind of life you're living. I can't go anywhere. I can't even go to the bathroom without 3 people following me." He then confessed, "I'd give all this up to lead a normal life, to have my wife, my kids, and a job I could be proud of, to provide for my family." This was not the voice of the king, but of a man desperately weary of the cage of fame. He longed for simplicity, for the freedom to be an ordinary man who loved his family. This confession reveals the heavy price he paid for his crown. A tender heart. Elvis and the purity of children. Why did Elvis Presley always melt when he held a baby? In this photograph, Elvis Presley is cradling an adorable baby in his arms, and for a moment, the world's biggest star becomes something far simpler and more beautiful, a man overflowing with warmth and tenderness. The image reveals a side of Elvis that few saw, but those who knew him never forgot, the gentle soul behind the legend. Though he often appeared confident and strong, Elvis had a heart that softened instantly around children. He loved their laughter, their innocence, and the purity of their affection. Friends recalled how he would stop everything just to kneel down and talk to a child or make them smile. In those moments, the stage lights and fame disappeared. That love reached its fullest expression when his daughter Lisa Marie was born. From the moment he first held her, the king was completely undone, replaced by the awe of a father who couldn't believe something so precious was his. The Vegas rebirth. Priscilla's encouragement. How did Priscilla help Elvis Presley prepare for his triumphant 1969 return to the stage? In August 1969, Elvis Presley sat quietly beside Priscilla in their suite at the International Hotel in Las Vegas, charged with anticipation for a monumental comeback. After 8 long years devoted mostly to films, Elvis was about to return to the stage, the place he loved most. Priscilla knew how much this moment meant to him, how the silence of Hollywood had nearly broken his spirit, and how he longed not for fame, but for genuine connection. As she sat with her hand resting on his, she told him softly, "You can do this." It was a powerful act of faith. When Elvis finally stepped onto that vast stage, the crowd rose to its feet before he even sang a word. In his white suit, he wasn't just performing, he was reclaiming himself. The voice was stronger, the energy raw, and the charisma undeniable. By the end of the night, there was no doubt the king had returned, not as a relic of the past, but as a force reborn, thanks in part to the quiet strength of the woman who believed in him.
The simple gift, an act of spontaneous generosity. What spontaneous, life-changing gift did Elvis Presley once give to his limousine driver? One late night, after a long and exhausting performance, Elvis Presley stepped into his waiting limousine. Instead of resting, Elvis leaned forward, his voice soft with that unmistakable Southern warmth, and began to talk to the driver. "Is this your car?" he asked gently, "or do you just drive it for the company?" The driver hesitated, unsure how to answer, before quietly admitting, "No, sir, I just work for the company. The car's not mine." Elvis smiled, that familiar, boyish smile full of kindness and mischief, and after a pause, he simply said, "Well then, from now on, it's yours." This single, spontaneous act was a testament to the king's enormous heart. He didn't give for the cameras or the headlines. He gave because he loved to surprise people and change their lives with a single gesture. It was his way of sharing the unbelievable fortune that had come to the poor boy from Tupelo. Aloha from Hawaii, the world's first global concert. What made Elvis Presley's 1973 Aloha from Hawaii a global first? On January 9, 1973, the skies over Honolulu were alive with excitement as Elvis Presley's chartered Boeing 747 touched down. This wasn't just another arrival, it was the quiet prelude to history. Within days, Elvis would perform Aloha from Hawaii, the first concert by a single artist ever broadcast live via satellite to more than 40 countries. No one had ever done it before. When he stepped off the plane, he was flown by helicopter to the Hilton Hawaiian Village on Waikiki Beach, where 1,000 fans cheered wildly below. Elvis took the entire top floor, turning it into a quiet sanctuary. Each night, he rehearsed in the Hawaiian Dome, fine-tuning every note for the night that would beam his voice across the planet. His loyal band practiced nearby, preparing for the monumental event. That night, Elvis connected the world, proving that his music was a force strong enough to conquer boundaries and reach every heart on earth. Baltimore. The cage of expectation. What did Elvis Presley's temporary walk-off in Baltimore reveal about the pressure he faced? In his final years, Elvis Presley wasn't simply growing tired. He was slowly breaking beneath the weight of a crown he never truly wanted to wear. The fame that had once lifted him began to press down, heavy and relentless. Every time he looked in the mirror, he didn't see the legend. He saw a man trying to keep up with an impossible image. In Baltimore, the cracks finally began to show. Mid-performance, his body faltered before his spirit ever did, and for a brief, alarming moment, he left the stage. When he returned, he smiled faintly, joking about nature calling. The crowd laughed, unaware of the deep pain he carried. It wasn't the joke that mattered, it was the kindness behind it. Even in suffering, he still gave. Doctors called it exhaustion, but it was a soul worn thin from decades of giving everything, his time, his strength, his peace to the world. The king was quietly aching for rest, trapped by the love that had made him famous. How did Elvis Presley's humility define his return from military service? "I'm just an ordinary soldier. I did what everyone else had to do and tried my best. The Army taught me a lot about discipline and responsibility." These were Elvis Presley's words in March 1960 at the Memphis airport, where thousands gathered to welcome him home from his military service. Though the cheers were thunderous, what moved people most was the quiet strength of the man who had faced duty with profound humility.
At the press conference, Elvis appeared not as the flashy performer the world remembered, but as someone changed, more grounded, more mature, more human. He could have bragged about his fame, yet he chose to honor the experience and the men he served with. His simple words carried a depth that revealed the man behind the myth. He proved that fame had not spoiled the good Southern boy, demonstrating that his true greatness lay not just in his voice, but in his character. The unseen cause, Elvis's quiet final battle. What was the silent, painful health condition that contributed to Elvis Presley's passing? On August 16, 1977, the world said goodbye to Elvis Presley, with the official cause described as a heart attack. But the deeper, heartbreaking truth was that Elvis had lived his entire life carrying a silent burden. He was born with a twisted colon, a rare condition that caused him constant, severe pain and chronic illness. In the weeks before his passing, his body was overwhelmed by years of discomfort few could imagine. The relentless pain led him to take medication not out of recklessness, but out of necessity, to numb the suffering and maintain the strength to perform. On his final day, he took more than his body could handle, not because he wanted to die, but because he was fighting to keep going. He was still trying, still planning his next tour, still determined to live up to the world's expectations. What ended his life was not weakness, but exhaustion. A man who gave everything he had until there was nothing left to give. The first glimpse, Priscilla in Germany. What was Elvis Presley's immediate reaction when he first met Priscilla Beaulieu in Germany? September 13, 1959. In the soft glow of a home in Bad Nauheim, Elvis Presley, the world's most famous soldier, met a 14-year-old girl in a sailor dress, Priscilla Beaulieu. When she walked in, time seemed to hesitate. Elvis immediately rose to greet her, caught off guard by her quiet grace and innocence. He didn't see a girl, he saw something pure and unexpected. For Elvis, who struggled with the German language, it was a relief to speak with someone who understood the same music and feelings. She mentioned liking Mario Lanza, and his eyes lit up. "That's my favorite too," he smiled. Those who were there saw the spark. Charlie Hodge remembered, "She had a kind of poise, an aloofness about her. Elvis told me over and over, 'Charlie, Priscilla is the most beautiful creature I ever saw.'" That evening, beneath the soft hum of music, a bond began that would shape both their lives. The unsung tour, the dream of Europe. What long-awaited international tour was Elvis Presley planning before his death? Not many people know that Elvis Presley was finally preparing to take his music to Europe in 1978. After years of conquering American stages, he was ready to cross the Atlantic to sing in London, Paris, and cities that had adored him from afar. For European fans who had spent decades dreaming of seeing him, the thought of Elvis walking onto their stages was almost too good to be true. For the first time, the king was coming to them. But destiny can be cruel. Just months before that long-awaited tour, in August 1977, the world stopped. Elvis Presley was gone. The tickets were never printed, the lights never set, and the songs that might have filled those grand halls remained unsung. The unfulfilled dream reminds us that even legends have roads they never got to travel. Yet, in a way, Elvis did make it to those faraway places. His music crossed every border. His voice reached every heart, proving he never truly left. 6 Cadillacs, the spontaneous joy of giving. What spontaneous, over-the-top prank did Elvis pull on a Las Vegas car dealership? It was a golden afternoon in Las Vegas, and Elvis grew restless in his Hilton suite. Gazing at the strip, a familiar spark lit up his eyes. With a grin, he called out, "Hey Joe, come here, I've got something for you to do." Within minutes, Joe Esposito was on his way to a car dealership with instructions straight from the king. Deliver 6 Cadillacs, not 1, but 6, to the front of the Hilton within 30 minutes. Elvis had his telescope fixed on the dealership, watching the employees run back and forth trying to make the impossible happen. He was doubled over with laughter. Against all odds, the cars arrived right on time. For Elvis, it wasn't about the money. It was about the thrill of the moment and the pure joy of surprising everyone. That day remains a testament to who Elvis truly was: generous, spontaneous, and full of life, reminding everyone that every day with the King was an unforgettable adventure. The simple, pure love. Who was Anita Wood, and what kind of hope did she represent for Elvis? In 1957, when Elvis Presley stood at the peak of his early fame, he met Anita Wood, a talented singer and television personality whose warmth immediately caught his heart. Amid the whirlwind of cameras and fame, their connection felt surprisingly simple and pure. Friends said Anita brought out the gentler side of Elvis, the boy from Tupelo who still believed in quiet love and long talks. Their relationship blossomed as Elvis's life spun faster than ever. When Elvis was drafted and sent to Germany, Anita stayed home in Memphis, loyal and patient, waiting for his return. She believed in him completely, and each letter she received carried the hope that their love would survive the distance. But time and circumstance shift, and when he came home, something between them had quietly changed. Years later, Anita spoke of their time with tenderness. "I'll always remember him, not as the legend, but as the man who once promised me forever." The eternal trio, Lisa Marie's legacy. What was the enduring emotional bond between Elvis Presley and his daughter Lisa Marie? Lisa Marie Presley came into the world on February 1, 1968, in Memphis, the only child of Elvis Presley. From the moment she was born, she was the little girl who held her father's heart, his Yisa, the joy that brought laughter back into Graceland's halls. After losing her father at just 9 years old, Lisa Marie carried his light with her through life's storms. Music became her refuge, her way of speaking to him across the years. Her voice, smoky and strong, carried the same soul and ache that once poured from Elvis's heart. She endured immense loss, including the passing of her beloved son, Benjamin Keough. When Lisa Marie passed away in 2023, she was laid to rest at Graceland, beside her father and her son. 3 generations bound together in eternity. For those who walk through the gates of that home, the story continues. A father's love, a daughter's song, and the enduring spirit of a family that still touches hearts all over the world.